churches that are thriving are doing things, again, so big and so grand that they know they can't possibly succeed without God. That's the line of just kind of existing and living.
Welcome to the Thrive Podcast. I'm Dave Jones, and this is Jim Book. The purpose of our podcast is to offer practical ministry insight and leadership wisdom to help churches thrive in living out their mission in the world in which we live. And we're so excited to be doing this live recording from the headquarters of the Christian Restoration Association in Mason, Ohio. I'm a trustee with the CRA. Jim is associate director. Jim, just briefly tell us, what is your job? What do you do?
Well, you guys brought me on and said, hey, we would like you to be the associate working under John, which I love doing. But your primary focus, Jim, is to help develop vision, work with leaders, and coach churches as they desire to grow both numerically and spiritually using methods that we have used in the past at our own church. Although you don't have to replicate what we did in my home church at Kissimmee, but just kind of helping churches with their vision and their growth.
Which ties very much into what we're trying to do with the podcast.
Yes.
The Thrive Podcast is to help churches understand how to thrive in the mission God has given them. And so you are on the road a bunch. And so where in the world have you been?
Well, we're in Zimbabwe because now the CRA has an incredible relationship with the Hippo Valley Christian Mission.
What's going on in Zimbabwe that you were there? Yeah.
So obviously, one of the things that we love now is we have a magazine that's being printed in Zimbabwe using their preachers. We have kind of we have John here as our editor, but we have a guy named Emmanuel who's John over there. He is phenomenal. And 22,000 kids at a Christian school through 29 schools, churches on all campuses, a Bible college that's thriving, Central Africa Christian College in Harare, which is the capital city. And man, they're looking to train and send Bible college students now to the 5 surrounding countries that border Zimbabwe. It is an incredible mission. Dave, it surpassed my expectations.
Our church has been a huge supporter.
Well, you're the one that got
connected with
it.
Yeah, and I served for a period of time as a board member with Hippo Valley. My daughter does there. But the mission, it's a great story of how it got started. A POW in World War II said, if you get me out of this, I'm going to serve you wherever you send.
He was at the Battle of the Bulge. That's right.
Yeah, so between the Pembertons and the Pruitts, they go to Africa. It used to be called Rhodesia at the time.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe, a little bit of history for you here. But the mindset that they had was we could go and start churches, but and certainly the spiritual needs of the people are important, but there's also the intellect that's not being met, and then the medical needs that aren't being met.
Yes.
So really what Hippo Valley has become, and Al does a great job, Al Serhal, of advancing this mission, is addressing the heart, the mind, the soul, the body of the individuals. Because there's a hospital, medical clinics, you talked about the schools, 22,000 students, but also a number of churches way out in the bush.
Yes, absolutely.
We think about rural America with cornfields, they're in the bush of Africa there. And so when you think about what's going on over there, what we talk about trying to thrive as an American.
Yes.
How is that mission thriving in your mind?
We were at Pemberton Station, which is kind of a state-of-the-art campus. It's the high school. But now they want to start a primary school. So we had a huge groundbreaking, 1,500 members from the Churches of Christ that could get there on buses or by foot, got there. It was the most amazing thing. And I was able to preach the revival. It was kind of like a CIY environment. There was like 700 high school students. We had almost 50 baptisms. Central Africa Christian College took off the week. All their students came down to lead small groups, to be involved in activities. What I was watching is the reality is they're training and challenging young people to be worldview missionaries in their country for Jesus Christ. But they're using elementary, primary schools, grade schools, high schools to do that. And it's just it's one of the most comprehensive programs, to start to finish, holistically, like you said, mind, body, and spirit. We could borrow that same philosophy here.
Quick question: why do you think we don't?
It's just a lot of work.
In general, okay.
It's a lot of work. I mean, I think we built kind of this mindset is a preacher's like, I got a great sermon on Sunday. We got a beautiful auditorium. Our praise team is state of the art. That's all we need. The reality is Jesus always met needs before he rolled out the message. He would heal, feed, preach. There's a method to that.
That's
I think
really
we could use even today.
Let's get back to that in a minute. When we talked to Al about our involvement, the CRA with Hippo Valley, Al talks about it's a critical moment for the restoration movement in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, according to his studies, and he's really immersed himself in evaluating the growth chart of the restoration movement in sub-Saharan Africa, he believes that within 20 years, there'll be more restoration movement churches in Africa than the United States, which is a sad statement for the United States of America. But for sub-Saharan Africa, it's huge. And I will tell you, Dave, after being there, the preachers just can't get enough of the information. They love when the Restoration Herald gets there because they can read and it furthers their knowledge. Central Africa Christian College is doing a phenomenal job of training and putting these preachers out. I had an opportunity to speak more than once to the college students, and they've got a good thing going. But I'll tell you what, they don't know the word no. We were visiting Victoria Falls, just kind of taking in the sights. They're scouting out a place to begin a separate campus in Victoria Falls, and we just started a Christian church there, worship there. I got a chance to speak there. Hotel, there's the Restoration Herald magazine in the lobby. I mean, it's just amazing what God's doing over there. But it's attached to vision and courage and faith.
Well, it seems I've looked at vision in the past as this big, way out there dreams that you never thought you could dream before, of things. And there's certainly an aspect of that. But it looks like what they're doing and what a lot of effective churches do, I think, is just what is our next thing?
Yes.
What are we doing now that we could do better? But what is something we're not doing that would help advance the kingdom of God? So when you travel around to all of these churches in the States, and really grateful for that opportunity. I'm sure it was a top 5 trip.
It was, Dave, the Africa trip, I learned more than I taught them. Okay. I really did. And I've been on mission trips before, different countries, where I thought, I thought things could be run more effectively. That's one of the tightest missions I've ever been on, and they just do it really well. It's excellence. These students all in uniforms, I mean, sharp. They came in these massive buses. I'm talking on broken down vans. Their mode of transportation is better than some of ours, but they have to bring that many students in. They said, Jim, would you like us to visit the 3 young students you and Jeanette sponsored? I was like, yeah. I didn't know it was going to be 8 million miles in the bush. I mean, it was so far in the middle of Africa, and here in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking middle of nowhere. There's like 800 students in this school, primary school. It's like, where they come from? Oh, they come from all over. Wow. So I got to meet our 3 kids, and I got to visit one of the classrooms and the children. I prayed over the students, and I just, held my hand up when I prayed. When I said amen, all the kids had their hands. It was the most precious thing I ever seen.
I was like, incredible.
I was like, yeah, this is God's blessing this work.
So we're blessed to have that opportunity to minister there. That's a whole new work for the CRA.
Oh, I know.
And next year we'll have some great news about some leadership training we're doing there. I think you're heading.
I know John's heading over to do some leadership training with the preachers, like in February.
So just an incredible picture when we think about what they're doing. You talked about it. Tight operation, doing everything in excellence. So as you travel around, one of the things we want to do in our Thrive podcast is see what churches are doing that help them to thrive. What are some principles you saw in Africa that maybe would help us thrive? And maybe you're seeing some of those same principles lived out in the churches that you're seeing here in America.
Well, one of the things that I saw there was that they don't know no. Everything that the mission does over there, there's no goal that is dismissed because of money. If it's dismissed, it's because, well, it's just a bad idea, or we don't think the Lord's going to bless it. But they don't talk about money first. It's talk about need, and will this accomplish greater things for the Lord? And then they talk about how to raise the money.
Okay.
And let's face it, Al and that team know how to raise money, But again, God is blessing them. And there's my favorite verse, I think one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible, David, is found in Ephesians, that God will do immeasurably more than we can even ask or imagine, according to his power. But he's not going to imagine for us. We have to imagine. That's our job. He said, you do the imagining, but through my power and my blessings, I'll grant them. And I think a lot of churches could have been far further along in their own ministries, but they just quit imagining.
That's incredible. So you have a lot of touch points in your role, in your ministry, even beyond the CRA, but one of your primary responsibilities is to work with churches directly.
Yes.
And to help cast that vision for community.
Yes.
Preach. Is that how you would?
Yeah. I was in a church in Indiana a few weeks ago, and I'm a huge believer in, when I go and work with churches, is to ask them to, do it. Let's do a DNA evaluation. Who's here? What's the color of their skin? What's their socioeconomic status? Level of education? You're like, that doesn't matter. It does. Everybody needs Jesus. But again, you start with the low-hanging fruit. Start with your audience. I'm a huge believer in that. I mean, when you read the book of Acts, Paul and Silas would always get to a city, and the first thing they did was Google the closest synagogue. And they went right there, because that's where the low-hanging fruit was. And then they would work their way out. So I was at a church in Indiana, and I noticed gobs of kids, just a lot of young families. When we met with the elders, there was a little discouragement that Wednesday nights were slow, and it was just the regulars. And these families weren't really tuning into the extracurricular Bible studies. And so my recommendation was, hey, people will go to the things that mean something to them. Okay. Look, we go to the doctor when we're sick because the doctor's relevant to us getting well. We go grocery shopping when you open up the cupboard, there's no food.
We go to a ball game when our grandson's playing.
Absolutely. So people are going to want to go to a church that's relevant to their needs. So I suggested, look, all these families, there should be some parenting classes from a biblical perspective. There should be some marriage enrichment stuff from a biblical perspective. There should be some really highly developed children's programs that are going on simultaneously. I said, that's not pragmatic, by the way. That's not pragmatic theology. That's biblical. And the Bible is the best tool for marriage and child raising ever. Let's start doing that. Secondly, I said, I noticed this is a military town. It's an Air Force. Yeah. So I just suggested, what if you guys, during the holidays, had a massive blowout meal for the military personnel that are in the offices very close to your church? A DNA. We're not in a military town where I was at Kissimmee. We would have had nobody show up. Well, there was a Salvation Army store, but that's not connected to the military. Anyway, and they're like, you know what? That's a possibility. Again, DNA. Who's in your town? What's the best way to reach them? All roads lead to the baptistry, though.
Yeah.
But there are multiple roads that we can take to get us there.
Jim, that's real interesting, because a lot of times when we look at churches that are thriving, I remember when we were building our building back in 2019, I was introduced to speak somewhere else. And one of the things that the preacher there added in my bio is that they're in the midst of a building program, as if that was some sort of gravitas,
right,
for me to be their preacher.
Graduated as a preacher now.
And so a lot of times when we look at momentum, vision, thriving as a church, it relates to these expansions of our buildings, and that could be a part of it. But I like what you pointed out about your encouragement to that church. Two things that would cost them essentially no money. Number one, instead of just teaching your Sunday night classes about how to get baptized or whatever, and that's
to the same audience, staring at for 30 years.
What if you just shifted a little bit, and turned maybe to Ephesians chapter 5 and talked about marriage, and Ephesians chapter 6 and talked about raising children and meeting people's needs where they are. And then there's incredible programs out there that we could invest in that'll help. We can modify Celebrate Recovery or Grief Share and make sure that the doctrine is right, all of that. But those are great outreaches as well. The second thing you mentioned to that church was the Thanksgiving meal. And so here's how our church in the past has operated at Thanksgiving. On a certain Sunday, we're all going to bring all our food. We're all going to stay in the building that afternoon. We're all going to eat together. We're all going to love on one another. Then we're going to go home and take naps.
Right.
What if instead of doing that, the church that you were talking about hosted that meal on a Saturday night for military families? This is basically what you're saying. And so maybe sometimes it means we don't do what we're used to always doing and shift a little bit, pivot to reach our community and the needs that they have.
Now, let me ask you a question, Dave. Let's say you were in the military, you and your wife went, and you don't go to a church. You don't hate God. You don't hate the Bible. It's just you don't have time for it. It's irrelevant to you because up till now. but the church down the street's doing this and your friends are all going and there's probably going to be some patriotic music. I don't know, something to honor, all right, military. You go home and you go to your wife, maybe we should start going to church. I didn't know that's a great church like that. And he said, yeah, they were so friendly. All right, you're now in a position to think maybe we should go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would have never thought that. That's a vehicle. It's just an avenue.
And there's all kinds of communities like that that have shifted. So one of the, go ahead.
Well, yeah. This happened this week. The preacher and I, we got revival, got done Sunday night. We went to Wendy's. The lady behind the counter goes, hey, I want to feed all my employees. I want to do a big Thanksgiving dinner for all my employees. She's the manager. And she goes, can I use your fellowship hall? Well, the preacher said you could, but the Midway Church of Christ is literally a half a mile from you. Here's the preacher's name, call him. I'm like, okay, probably should have warned him ahead. So we went back the next night. She was elated. She's like, I called Dan. They're going to let us use their fellowship hall. And I was like,
that's cool.
Now, I don't want to tell Dan how to do his job, but if I were Dan, I would have them all sit and say, you serve people every day from behind the counter. You're going to get to be served. Our church family, I would have a gift basket for every one of them. I guarantee you, if there's a Wendy employee that's like, I'm searching for meaning in my life.
Yeah.
I need a church home. I need community. I need to be, what did John Ortberg say? Show the goodness of God. Start with the goodness of God. That creates an appetite for them to want the goodness of God and then lead them down the plan of salvation.
Oh, man.
Start with the goodness of God. And it always leads to, hey, tell me about your Jesus.
Yeah. So in your work, you're working with churches. School has been a huge part of your life.
Yeah.
Starting schools. Your dad did that. Your sister is the administrator at the Kissimmee School. You guys started the school there, if I'm not mistaken, when you came. School is a part of that. I know you worked at the Lake Mount Church in a men's ministry that is geared toward reaching the men in the community. Doing a great job there. So what are some very practical things you're seeing? You've mentioned a meal for the military. What are some very practical things you're seeing churches do that do reach outside their walls?
I think we're working right now with 3 churches, soon to be 4, on developing a Christian school. Now, it's not for every church. I get it. But these are churches that feel like their communities are looking for alternatives to secular education. And so we, representing the CRA and this coaching ministry that I'm in, we're now working with them to help them get their schools started. And we've had great success in the schools that I've helped start with the Lord's help. But I love being able to take that information. We're able to take all of the not curriculum, but the application material, student handbook, teacher's handbook. We just send them everything. They put their logo on. I mean, we've done all the heavy lifting.
Wow.
But that's the service that we're offering from the CRA. And, I tell churches, it really was a benefit to us. We baptized more families, more kids into Christ, reshaping their worldview using that avenue. Again, it may not be for everybody, but again, it's an opportunity to be externally focused, and I'm big on externally focused.
Yeah, and we've really seen in specifically the post-COVID culture, a heightened interest in parochial schooling.
Yes.
And we look at Harlan, Indiana, what they're doing at the Harlan Christian Church and the school there.
My dad started that one.
He did.
It was at a revival, and the preacher's like, Harvey's like, I love what you do. And he flew.
Yeah, Harvey Hacker.
He flew to Orlando, stayed in our house, went back and started school, and it's thriving.
Oh.
Yeah, so, I mean.
Keenan Gooseman in West Virginia.
He's at Ripley,
Yeah, they're doing a good work.
Yeah, they're doing great. We've done some loan work with them to kind of CRA.
We've looked at in our setting, we're out in the middle of nowhere, not an ideal location for people to drop off their kids on the way to work. It's the complete opposite direction. What are some things you're encouraging churches to do to reach their community academically in that way? Besides starting a school.
I'll tell you, an alternative to a full-blown school is homeschool hubs. Every homeschool family wants a place once a week that they can take their kids and have great fellowship with other homeschool families. Our girls went once a week to First Christian Orlando. They were the hub. They got to fellowship. They got to do their work with a full group their age. And I've encouraged churches, listen, this is a huge way to connect with your community. Cost hardly anything, but you become the hub. It's once a week, so they can families. And then what I've encouraged them to do, and I learned this from the Myrtle Beach Church, they do a homeschool program, is while the kids are in a particular class or drama class or a cooking class, the preacher's wife runs like 80 women in a Bible study. So she's planting the gospel in these moms' minds while the kids are at a drama program in the homeschool program. So it's once a week, but again, it's just connecting with your community and you as the church setting the tone. Because your goal is to bring them through the homeschool program to the church.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned briefly something about DNA and determining the DNA of your community.
Yes.
How do you do that? And then how do you attach it to what you might want to offer? Because, for example, at Kissimmee, you had how many language services?
Well, we had 5 language groups.
Okay.
Right. We had 5 language groups in the city.
Yeah. If we did that at Millwood, it would be,
English
irrelevant.
Good English and not so good English.
Yeah, okay, exactly. So I'm not going to bring that idea to Millwood.
Absolutely.
So when I think about the DNA of a specific community and trying to discern what we ought to do, how do you make that connection, that bridge?
Yeah. So
what you should do.
So I've been in communities where there's a high level of senior adults. And I was in a church in Pennsylvania. This town is so small that just a few weeks ago, their elementary school closed. But senior adult living places are going in and revamping these schools for senior adult programming.
Huh.
So I said to the church, I said, look, you don't have to be Einstein to figure out who your audience is, right? And they're like senior adults. So now what they do is they take groups from the church and minister in these homes. They take bags of goodies and just connect with them. And I said, it won't be long before those people are going to go, that's the church that's always here. That's it. But that's a senior adult community now.
And you know what that does? It not only helps the senior who needs encouragement, and hopefully if they're not saved, they become Christians.
Yes.
But guess who they're going to tell as soon as they're done? They're going to call their kids and their grandkids.
Absolutely.
And those kids and grandkids are going to see that this church loves grandma.
Absolutely.
And have an impact on them.
And so I was very impressed.
Love that.
With what that church was doing. And they could have been the kind of church that got depressed because the town is dying. And it is. There is no commerce. I mean, when the school closes, I mean, hey. But they're like, you know what? Who's still here? Well, it seems like senior adult living is escalate. All right, well, then that's our audience. Go after them hard and fast.
Yeah.
Your programming, even your worship service, needs to be geared. I mean, if that group likes to sing hymns, then you probably ought not be singing Striper that Sunday. Keep it hymns. Keep it hymns.
I love what you mentioned earlier. Well, something you said really reminded me of the church in Frazeysburg, Ohio, Meadowview. You and I are good friends with Sam Dunn there. And they lost their major industry a number of years ago. And they could have used that as an excuse to say, hey, our community's not doing great. We're just sort of going to flutter by and continue to function. But what they've really done is tapped into their community. They've got incredible outreach to kids. And they're actually going to be building a community center that can be used in their community. There's nothing like it.
Right.
And then it'll be the youth room for the kids, a gymnasium. And Sam and their youth minister just do a great job of ministering in the schools there.
Yeah, well, they're
just identified. Then
they're in that. It's called a Lifeway program. They go
LifeWise.
They this huge bus.
Yeah, that's right.
Some on their and Sam is one of the teachers these kids.
Yeah.
And I think that what they want to do, as you said, want to build this new building that now encompasses more program they can do through the week with these kids, not just that one. And I guarantee you, you're going to see an escalation in family and children joining the church, becoming actively involved.
So obviously, Jim, we've really, in this first episode, brought it to a point of understanding that one of the key things that you're identifying in churches around the world are churches that aren't just preaching the truth of biblical Christianity, which we must do,
right?
But they're really meeting very practical needs of the community in which they operate.
Yes.
In that way. And so when we think about this idea of community outreach and the desire that I hope we all have to be thriving churches, how can a church practically, who maybe doesn't have that mindset, how can they get to that next step of saying that's what we want to be?
Now, so we don't want to marginalize the importance of inwardly focused programs. I mean, we've got to have great preaching. We can't have a shallow educational program. Discipling is fundamental. But I look at those as inwardly strong programs. My fear is we have been teaching some of the same people for 30 years, and they've never regurgitated anything that they've learned. And so I decided when I became a part of this organization and I talked to the board, I said, hey, my focus is not going to be on the inward structure, because I think that's important. I'd like to help churches develop what I call an externally focused concept of church growth and development using the Acts model. This is not pragmatic theology. This is an Acts model. And I learned there are 6 key principles to being a strong, externally focused church. And real quickly, they are inwardly strong, but they're outwardly focused. So they're inwardly healthy, biblically sound, but they're always thinking how to win that person at Wendy's, or how to win those people in the military, how to win those kids in our neighborhood. Number 2, they integrate good deeds and good news into the life of the communities. So you can't just have good deeds. You're introducing the good deeds and the good news, which is the gospel. So they're one and the same. Number 3, they value impact and influence in the community. They want to be influencers. I used to use this phrase a lot, Dave, when I would end our service on Sunday Kissimmee. I said, okay, before we leave, I want to ask you a question. If Kissimmee Christian Church closed today, would the town miss us?
Oh, man.
Now go out and think, because that always means, yes, they would miss us. Okay, then we need to keep doing what we're doing. Like, I don't know if they miss us or not. Well, then we need to reevaluate our purpose.
Wow.
Number 4, outwardly, externally focused churches seek to be salt and light within their community. They're always looking, again, to be a healing agent, something bring taste and life to a dead community. Number 5, they see themselves as the soul of the community. And I know it's like, how does the church become the soul of the community? I thought that was the elementary school or the hospital. I was like, no, we need to be the heartbeat of this community. We need to set the temperature of the moral climate, spiritual climate of this town. And last but not least, outwardly, externally focused churches, the community would miss them if they weren't there. They would if you weren't here, we wouldn't have the homeless fed. Or if you weren't here, our kids wouldn't be educated. If you weren't here, we wouldn't have a Monday to go to have our Celebrate Recovery program so we could work through our hangups. Or like you guys have started, I'm a widow. I wouldn't have this program to go to. Yeah. And by the way, there's a preacher in Colon, Michigan, a Christian church. His wife died, and he started Grief Shares Church. He baptized 2 widows the other day. So these externally focused programs really help us identify with our community.
That's great.
And we got to get past this idea that we put a brand new sign up at a new building and people are just automatically going to come.
Yeah. That wasn't the case for us.
No, it wasn't.
As we wrap this up, there's one verse that I tap into a lot and I'm reminded of often, and it's the sons of Issachar understood the times and they knew what Israel must do. And I'm reminded of you when I read that verse, because you very much, not just from a worldview or political viewpoint, but this idea of the times being the needs of the people. How does that play out for these? Let's end with that idea, and how do we help these preachers, elders, and ministry leaders that are listening to the podcast become like those sons of Issachar?
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned Issachar. It reminds me of a book I read entitled Issachar Factor. And boy, this was a chilling comment. He says, no longer can churches afford to just maintain. People are starting to expect results. And if they don't see movement in the overall direction of the church, they'll move on to another ministry or another church.
Oh.
This idea that, well, they've been going to this church for 25 years, they're never going to leave. Well, their kids are going to get older and their kids are going to probably go, hey, I need some needs met. I mean, you guys were hyper focused on small group ministries. That wasn't so popular 30 years ago, but that is really, that's a niche that's reaching a lot of people, like keeping people in the church.
Yeah, it is.
So if people don't feel like my spiritual needs are being met, they're going to leave.
And not just spiritual, but relational.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, church is a community. So Dave, we'll maybe end with this. One of my favorite verses in the Old Testament is Benaniah chasing a lion on a snowy day in a pit. And so I just challenge churches. Have you ever chased a lion? And I'm talking about a ministry, a dream, a vision so huge that you knew it couldn't possibly happen if God wasn't driving it, blessing it, in front of it. Because so many of the things we do, our budgets, our vision, are things that I sometimes wonder if God just looks down and goes, y'all are fine without me. You can put tires on the van without me.
Wow.
You can paint the women's bathroom without me. I mean, that seems to be the extent of our goals. So we've got to start putting goals and visions and ideas together that's so huge. That's like we walk out going, this is going to fail without God. And I think that's when God goes, thank you. That's the kind of vision I'll bless.
That's incredible. Well, Jim, you are in the right spot.
Well,
not
you,
just
bro.
in your role at the CRA, but within the kingdom and the impact that you and other preachers like you, I think, are having as we minister in churches and just try to help the mission of the gospel to win souls.
Absolutely.
Bring people to Christ. And it's got to start with an idea that it's beyond ourselves.
Absolutely. And preachers, give yourself opportunity to dream again. Give your elders an opportunity to dream big. You know, we serve a big God, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if a 90-year-old woman can have a baby, Sarah, I mean, what can't we do, right?
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Thrive Podcast. Practical ministry insight and leadership wisdom to help churches thrive in living out their mission.